Welcome to On The Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC Atlanta, which goes down this weekend on Saturday night. It's a fight night, but apparently we don't see the UFC Apex for a number of weeks. The UFC are on the road on the fight nights for at least a foreseeable, I think it's like a month or two, so I'm sure that'll definitely please some people and some listeners on the podcast. But we're in Atlanta, we're on the road. It's always good going on the road. You've got the local fighters to the cities and states. You've got the fans that get to attend the arenas and the events. You get the atmosphere, you get the noise. So yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to this next portion of, like I say, UFC being on the road, being back in the arenas. It's going to be a really fun watch. The card itself, again, with it being a fight night, it's not stacked with absolute huge names from top to bottom, but there's definitely going to be some local flavour and there's definitely going to be some banging fights. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the event. I'm looking forward to the fights, and we'll get breaking down the fights very shortly. But just before we do, as always, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler, whether you're a long-term gambler that likes written breakdowns to understand why we're recommending certain bets. We've got a section for you. Whether you're somebody that just wants to tailor professional handicapper, we've got an official bet section for you. Or if you're somebody that likes the fun parlays, the fun gamblers aspect of this, again, everything should be fun as well as winning money. We've got a fun gamblers section where we've got pre-built parlays. We've got a section where you can create your own parlay. So yeah, we've got everything for every type of gambler. Then of course, we've got our AI from Base AI, our UFC prediction software, which is on absolute fire right now. The last 3 events have been really, really good. Picked out some really good underdogs as well. Some like real high value underdogs, big odds underdogs as well. So again, Base AI, that's included in all of our betting subscriptions. We don't separate the AI from the professional handicapper service, so you get everything in one subscription, and all the subscriptions are super affordable as well, as our ethos is we want you to make the money back that you spend with us as quickly as you possibly can, so you can start profiting on top of your bets, and you do that with an affordable service, which is exactly what we are. So make sure, again, if you're wanting to jump into the action, you check out MMAplay365.com. And with the introduction out the way, with the promo out the way, let's get down to breaking some fights. And of course, as always, we start in the main event. We've got 5 rounds in the welterweight division between former UFC welterweight champion Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, for me, look, it's pretty simple. I think this is kind of a passing of the torch type of fight, and I say kind of, the key word there is kind of, because I'm not yet convinced that Joaquin Buckley is going to be heading towards a title shot in the UFC, and of course a passing of the torch with a former UFC champion that's been fighting at the highest level for such a long time. Passing a torch to the opponent some would assume, and again I think would rightly assume, that would mean that, you know, it's Buckley that's going to head towards that top of the division, and I'm not confident just yet that he's going to get up to that status of being in the top 3 in the division, being in title contention, you know, having that championship fight. I still think that there's a few big fights for Buckley before we can start talking like that. So what I actually mean with passing of the torch is, look, I think that Kamaru Usman's time at the top of the division, I think, is over. He's currently sitting ranked number 5 in the division. I kind of feel like the top 5 is coming to a close as well. You know, just a natural decline, and it happens to every single fighter, you know. And it's not just even this sport, it's like every sport. Like, age is unforgiving, and as an athlete, you know, you'll be developing as an athlete, you'll peak, you'll have your time, and then it's time to decline. And, you know, age waits for no man or woman. And I just think that with Usman, it's that time. You know, he's lost his belt that he had for a long time. He had his reign. He's now on a 3-fight losing streak, albeit 2 of those to Leon Edwards. the last loss to Khamzat Chimaev as well. And I just feel that although you can't really put too much stock in those losses, the fact is that Usman was such a dominant fighter for a very long time that you couldn't really see for a long time how he would lose. And now suddenly he's on a 3-fight losing streak, and now he's fighting a young, hungry stud that's on his way up. And you look at the betting odds, and Joaquin Buckley's anywhere from like -245 to -275 to fight Kamaru Usman. I mean, rewind sort of 3-4 years ago. Can you imagine those sort of odds when, Buckley's getting beat by a Kevin Holland, and now Kamaru Usman is a very sizable underdog to him. And again, it just comes down to, I think that Usman's just had his time. And when you look at stylistically of this fight, and you look at how Usman can win, well, one of Usman's best attributes for many years was the wrestling, but there was the rumours about his knees not being that great, damaged knees, and then slowly the wrestling stops. Like Usman, previously, I mean, you look at the Rafael dos Anjos fight, like Usman hit 12 takedowns in that fight. And then since then, the most he's hit in a single fight has been 5, but it's not been that wrestling heavy approach as what it used to be. So I don't think that the wrestling approach here is a path to victory for Usman. Not just because of the potential, damage into the knees and him not being able to wrestle maybe as efficiently as what he used to be able to, but just from like a speed, movement, athleticism perspective, like Usman has lost a step or two within that speed and movement, whereas Buckley, like I say, you've got this young, hungry, athletic stud on the other side that is going to be moving in and out of range, is going to be quick, is going to be landing hard shots on Usman. And I just feel it's going to be a very difficult fight for Kamaru Usman, because I kind of feel that he's going to have to compete for long portions of this fight for as long as it lasts on the feet striking. And I think that although Usman does clearly have power. Power's the last thing that goes in any declining athlete, like the speed, the movement, the footwork. They're all traits that sort of diminish, in the early stages of the decline, but the power is something that stays with you. So again, Buckley's got to mind his P's and Q's and manage this fight effectively, not get hit with anything too hard. But again, we've seen Buckley in some wars, like the dude can take a punch. So again, the puncher's chance for Usman, I just don't think is... well, it's always there. The puncher's chance is always there when you've got these level of professional mixed martial artists fighting with 4-ounce gloves in the UFC. The puncher's chance is always there, but I just don't think it's a high probability outcome. I think it's very low percentage. I think Buckley, again, he's just going to have his way in this fight. I think, I don't see too much of a wrestling threat from Usman. Even if Usman did take Buckley down, I think Buckley can get right back up to his feet. He's got a good get-up game. And I think that creates a fight that's won and lost on the feet. And like I say, at risk of repeating myself, you've got a young stud in Buckley that's going to be fast, that's going to have good movement, that's going to be hitting super hard, piling a ton of volume on Usman as well. And I just think it's going to be a rough one for Usman. I think that Buckley is a rightful moderate to large favourite in this fight. And for those reasons, I'm picking Joaquin Buckley to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Rose Namajunas versus Miranda Maverick. Now, this is an interesting fight because I like Miranda Maverick, and at 27 years of age, I still think that she's far from a prime. I still think that she's going to develop even further to where she's developed right now. And I actually like the progression of Maverick to the point where, look, she's got a good style. Like, she can strike well, she can wrestle, she can grapple, she can change game plans depending on who's in front of her. And again, I genuinely think in 2 to 3 years' time, she's going to be a much better version of herself than what she is right now. Because again, at 27, that's not prime anymore. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago it might have been, but athletes have got a better level of training, better level of coaching, better level of dietitians, nutritionists. The weight cutting, at least for the most part, should be a lot better with science and how that's developed and the understanding of the weight cutting. So again, I think that the prime of a fighter, again, it will depend on weight class, but the average prime for a fighter is much closer to like 31, 32 than it is 26, 27, what it was a number of years ago. So again, I think Maverick is still in a developmental stage, and I still think that she's going to be improving. The issue that I've got with Maverick against Rose Namajunas here is Rose Namajunas is a proven fighter at the top of the division. She's a multi-time champion in the UFC. She's had fights for as long as I can remember against the best fighters, the best women in the division. So she's not a fighter herself, in my opinion, that's on a decline. I do think that there's other fighters in the division that have surpassed her, like an Erin Blanchfield, for example, but I just don't think that she's on a decline. I just feel that, she's still a fighter at the top of the division, but she's not a champion because there are other fighters, like I say, that are passing her in regards to, skill set, which happens. But the issue that I've got with Maverick in this fight is Maverick's still yet to have that win where, that one statement win against a high level fighter in this division where you can say, right, okay, now Maverick has leveled up. She's beaten this fighter. This is a fighter that was in the top 5 or the top 10, and she's done it decisively. She's on her way up. She's improving. She's developing, and this is a time. And I kind of feel like she's beating the fighters that she's supposed to be beating, and she's falling short every time she has that step up in competition. And I kind of feel like the same thing's going to happen here. I do think at some point Maverick is going to have that statement win where we're like, okay, she's leveled up and she's now on the rise to the top of the division. But I just don't think this is going to be that statement win. That statement win won't be somebody like Rose Namajunas. In my opinion, I think it'll be somebody just a level down from Namajunas, but a level above Maverick, and that'll be that good step where she would then fight a Rose Namajunas, and you're thinking, okay, well, this is going to be a close fight because Maverick's just beaten X-fighter, who was a big step up in competition, but now this is a top step up in competition, and that would create that close fight. I just think that what I'm trying to say is I think that Maverick is just taken a level above in regards to that right step up in competition, and I just feel she's going to fall short because of it. I think that Rose Namajunas is going to be the slightly better striker, at least from a point scoring perspective. From a technical standpoint as well, I think she's a better Muay Thai striker as well. And then when it comes to the wrestling and grappling, maybe Maverick does hit a takedown or two, but Namajunas is difficult to take down. She's very difficult to keep down. It took Blanchfield quite a while to really get going against her as well. And again, you look at what happened with Blanchfield and Maverick, for example. So I do think that Namajunas is just a level ahead of where Maverick needs to be stepping up right now, and it will show inside the cage. So for those reasons, I'm picking Rose Namajunas to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Edmen Shahbazyan versus Andre Petroski. Now, this is an interesting fight. Again, you look at the line and you've got Edmen Shahbazyan that's sitting at minus 200, and instantly that always throws up flags for me. Just the same amount of flags that I would have if Andre Petroski was a minus 200 favourite in this fight as well. I think that here you've got two fighters that are very skilled but are also beatable as well, and I kind of think it's going to be a bit of a car crash type of fight. Even though Shahbazyan's a minus 200 favourite, I don't think this fight's going to be close at all. Whoever wins this fight, it's you can make solid arguments for either side, which I'll do so in the breakdown, but I think whoever wins this fight is going to make it absolutely decisive, and whoever wins this fight I think could end up looking like a minus 400, minus 500 favourite. From Shahbazyan's side, there's every chance here that Shahbazyan comes in here against Petroski, puts it on him early, overwhelms Petroski, lands something hard and knocks him out cold, walks off, looks minus 400, minus 500. But there's also every chance that Petroski gets Shahbazyan down to the mat, where Shahbazyan's had real issues in the past, grapples him topside and either takes him out with a submission or ground and pound, walks away, looks minus 400, 500. Or with Petroski, I also think that he could potentially drag this fight late, potentially go to a decision and comfortably just lay on Shahbazyan, pretty much all fight. Shahbazyan can't get back up to his feet, he's struggling, he's not too much of a threat, and I still feel that Petroski could look minus 400, minus 500, even via a decision as well. So again, I'm just looking at this fight and thinking, well, which fighter's going to end up having their game plan sort of nullified, or which fighter's going to be successful within the game plan? Because with Shahbazyan Shahbazyan, like I say, is a dynamic striker, especially early on, and Petroski's had issues with fighters that are fast, that are overwhelming, that can get in his face and crack hard. But on the flip side, Shahbazyan has had issues, historically against fighters that can get him down, and, fighters that have got a good wrestling game and that have got a good topside grappling game. Now, I've said it time and time again with Andrei Petroski as part of that camp with, the Daniel Gracie jiu-jitsu team. He's a legit black belt under Daniel Gracie. Other high-level fighters in that camp as well, like your Sean Brady's, your Pat Sabatini's, and your Jeremiah Wells, for example. Like, these are all high-level, top-side MMA grapplers. So if Petroski gets Shahbazyan down, I just think Shahbazyan's gonna have an absolute nightmare of a time. And when you look at the gas tank, both gas tanks are quite similar as well. I do think from Shahbazyan's perspective, he's definitely better early. I think Petroski's had gas tank issues, but what I've kind of learnt with Petroski over time is Petroski tends to gas himself out when he's the front runner in a fight, where in this fight, I feel that Shahbazyan's going to be the front runner. He's the one that's going to put the pressure on early. And he either takes Petroski out or he doesn't early. If he doesn't, I think Petroski, weathering a storm, will then be able to get takedowns easily against Shahbazyan, won't have to work too hard topside against Shahbazyan. So I think that gas tank will stay intact with Petroski. I think Petroski either gets knocked out or the gas tank's not an issue because of how tired Shahbazyan will be early on trying to get Petroski out of there. And again, it's things that we've seen for quite a while now. Shahbazyan does come out hot. He does come out hard. He looks great early in fights, but then suddenly the cardio drops off a cliff, and then all the defensive skill set drops off that cliff as well. So for me, it's a take your pick type of fight, because, like I say, I could absolutely see Shahbazyan coming in there early and knocking Petroski out cold and looking like he should have been a much bigger favourite. But on the flip side, if he doesn't do that, I think he's going to be in trouble now. Where I'm sitting at with my pick here is, look, more often than not, I will side with the fighter that needs to weather a storm and takes the fight late, rather than the fighter that's going to come out here early and get that early finish, especially at this weight class. Obviously, if you're looking at a Francis Ngannou, for example, then that's a completely different story altogether. But at the lower weight classes, I will normally favour the fighter that just needs to not get knocked out early, which I think is Petroski. And then when I'm looking at the odds as well, of course, it's a betting podcast, and, we do try and hunt for those underdogs. And with Petroski being that underdog and also being the fighter that just needs to not get knocked out early, and again, there's more to a fight than that, but I genuinely think that's the case here. I think if Petroski gets out of round one, well, why has he got out of round one? He's obviously survived Shahbazyan's overwhelming pressure, and he's obviously started to get to his own game plan as well. So again, couple those two things, the fighter that just needs to not get knocked out early, and that fighter's also the underdog as well. With a path to victory, I'm going to be siding with that fighter. So for those reasons, I'm picking Andrei Petroski to win this fight. And in the next fight, I feel like this one's going to be torn as well online. When you're looking at MMAX, obviously formerly Twitter, and you're looking at, people debating, I just feel that this is going to be one of those fights that people are going to be on both sides. We've got Cody Garbrandt versus Raoni Barcelos. Now, the thing is with Raoni Barcelos, again, we talk about fighters that are aging. He's 38. There is somewhat of a decline there, but I'll be honest, for 38, I still think he looks fine. I think he's in decent shape. He's not one of these typical 38-year-olds that, are getting touched and getting knocked out, and you're just worried for them inside the cage for every time they get landed on. But with that being said, Barcelos definitely isn't Barcelos of 4 or 5 years ago, when he was in his prime. Now with Cody Garbrandt's been on a roller coaster ride in the UFC. I still think one of the best singular performances that I've ever seen in mixed martial arts was Garbrandt's title fight against Dominic Cruz. I think the only one off the top of my head that surpasses that was the Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar performance, which was just fucking insane. But look, Garbrandt, he became a champion, and then he lost his belt. He was getting knocked out. He was getting reckless, seemed to lose his head inside the cage, and in between swinging big bombs in exchanges, he was getting caught. And like I say, the durability was cracked and he was in trouble. But then I still believe there's a fighter in Garbrandt. Like, you look at his last fight against Davis and Figueiredo, and I know he lost it, and I know he got finished, but you've got to dissect that fight in the right way, in my opinion. He came in there and everyone was like, including myself, like, holy shit, like, Figueiredo's moved up in weight. He's still carrying his power. Garbrandt is outmatched likely on the feet, outmatched wrestling and grappling, and he's fighting a fighter with power as well. And it was looking like bad news for Garbrandt. And yeah, like I say, he lost the fight and it was bad news, but he lost the fight in round 2. Now you look at how round 1 played out. Like, Garbrandt won round 1 on every single judge's scorecards. He came in that fight. He ate some shots from Deiveson Figueiredo as well, which tells me that maybe his chin's not quite as shot as what we think. Sure, the knockout's going to be a viable option here for Barcelos, who still hits hard, but Garbrandt took some shots from Deiveson Figueiredo, but not only that, he was torching Figueiredo up to an extent on the feet, to the point where all the judges scored round 1 to Garbrandt. What else that did as well is in round 2, Figueiredo came out and he instantly started taking this fight down to the ground, because he was thinking, well, yeah, Garbrandt is beating me on the feet. Garbrandt's got some solid traits still. He's still got power himself. Let's not forget that. For as many times as he's been knocked out badly, people forget that Garbrandt still holds a lot of power. But his speed, his movement, and his boxing is so fast, it's slick. And those are traits against an aging fighter at 38 years old that are going to cause some problems. And like I say, Garbrandt caused big problems for Deiveson Figueiredo, who I think is a level above Barcelos. So I think when you're looking at the striking here, it might be one of them where you're kind of hiding behind a pillar a little bit, with one eye poking out, that Garbrandt doesn't get hit with something. But if Garbrandt doesn't get knocked out, I just don't think Barcelos is going to have answers for him on the feet. I think Garbrandt's going to be too slick, too fast, too good. I think he's going to put good combinations together. Where the fight gets a little bit closer, outside of that knockout chance for Barcelos, is within the wrestling and grappling. Garbrandt can be taken down. We've seen that, although he's got a wrestling background himself. It's just a lot of fighters struggle to hold him down, and that's where I've got a bit of uncertainty in this fight, because I do think Barcelos can get takedowns on him, but does Barcelos hold him down? That's the big question, because if he doesn't, and he can't hold Garbrandt down, then the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. And like I've already said, I think outside of that puncher's chance for Barcelos, which might be a slightly higher percentage probability than if it was another opponent in front of Barcelos, because we've seen Garbrandt knocked out before. But outside of that knockout chance, I think Garbrandt's going to be the better striker. So for me, it comes down to, does Barcelos hold Garbrandt down? Because I kind of do feel Barcelos is going to hit takedowns in this fight anyway. So again, I don't think Garbrandt is the level of fighter that Barcelos has been beaten and slicing through like butter on the mat. There's more to Garbrandt's game. He's better defensively, both with the wrestling and grappling, than previous opponents of Barcelos. And because of that, I do lean towards the side of Barcelos might struggle to hold him down. And because of that, I think Garbrandt's going to have a good fight here. Got to mind his P's and Q's. Don't get into one of those brawls where he's swinging and Barcelos has found a gap in between, the wild exchanges. And I think Garbrandt gets the job done here. I think he deals with the takedowns, gets back up to his feet if he is taken down. And again, I think this is a fight where Garbrandt could potentially look quite good, as long as he doesn't do anything stupid and get knocked out. So for those reasons, I'm picking Cody Garbrandt to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got another Cody. We've got Cody Brundage versus Mansur Abdul-Malik. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think this is a horrific fight for Cody Brundage. I just do not know where he beats Abdul-Malik. Again, I've talked about puncher's chance quite a lot on this podcast, more than previous episodes. The puncher's chance is there, of course it is. He's a UFC level fighter with 4-ounce gloves. That can't be ignored. You can't take that away from any fighter, any division, any gender. It's just something that's a part of the sport. But I just do think it's low percentage in this fight. Like, we've seen Mansur Abdul-Malik punched. Brundage isn't typically known for that, one punch knockout power. Again, I'm sure he can hurt fighters, but he's more of a wrestler grappler type of style. And with Abdul-Malik, that's his style as well. The difference is, I think Abdul-Malik is a physical specimen. I think he's going to have speed, movement, power, aggression, pressure, all on his side here. Brundage is known for, not known, but he's been seen inside the cage sort of falling under high pressure, especially when you've got a big athlete in front of him like Abdul-Malik. I think Brundage is going to panic a little bit when when Abdul-Malik is throwing big shots whilst moving forward. Brundage will be on the back foot, trying to strike on the back foot. I don't think it'll be going well for him. I think he will try and strike on the back foot, and in between the punches he lands on Malik, which I don't think are going to land that hard, he's going to have bombs coming back at him. Does he level change, shoot onto a leg? Well, if he does, I just think, trying to take Abdul-Malik down in general is going to be difficult, but doing it on the back foot, I feel is a lot to ask for Brundage, and I feel like he's got a mountain to climb in this fight. I just think he's outmatched on the feet. Striking, I think he's outmatched wrestling and grappling, and I think he's outmatched with all the physical traits as well, speed, movement, size, strength. I just think it's a horrific fight for Brundage, and I expect Abdul-Malik to get this job done very convincingly. So for those reasons, I'm picking Mansur Abdul-Malik to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Alonzo Menifield versus Oumar Sy. Now, for me, this is another fight where I kind of feel like, Menifield's outmatched in this fight as well. It's similar to what I've just said with Brundage. I do think that Menifield's a lot more live to win here than what Brundage is. But, Oumar Sy's a fighter that I like a lot in this division. Again, he's big, he's powerful, he's athletic. He's got that wrestling style as well, where he can take you down and do some really good work on top, stay heavy, land ground and pound, look for a submission. But if it doesn't happen, that's fine. He'll just maintain his position. He's not gonna sell out for a submission or sell out for a big ground and pound situation if there's a chance that he could potentially lose his position, opponent stand back up, that type of thing. I think where Menifield's going to have success here is on the feet. I think that, Sy can strike as well, but I think that Menifield is definitely going to be a more dynamic striker. I think he's going to be a more overwhelming striker as well with the types of punches that he lands and in combinations as well. And let's not forget, Menifield is one of these types of fighters where, although he's got power, he's always liked the clinch game. And again, I feel like that can be your best friend and your worst enemy, because, yes, you've got all this power, but it's also good when you're a big boy in these divisions to be able to control fights as well, control the gas tank a little bit. But I kind of feel that two things here. If he tries to clinch it with Sy, I think Sy could potentially be the stronger fighter. But also, this is what Sy's going to want as well. If Menifield clinches up with Sy will think, okay, well, if my back's against the cage, I'll dig an underhook. I'll turn Menifield to put his back against the cage and then just drop down for a takedown. Get on a leg, single leg, double leg, get Menifield down. I think once Menifield's on his back, Sy's going to have a lot of success, and that's the reason why Sy's, a big favourite in this fight. I think he's going to have his way. I do think he's going to be slightly outmatched on the feet, but with the way Menifield fights, I think Menifield will crash into that pocket through strikes and will come into the clinch, try and push Sy back. And I just feel that Sy's going to be, the better level of fighter from those clinch positions. He's going to get the takedowns. He's going to tire Menifield out. And the longer the fight goes on, the easier it's going to be. So for those reasons, I'm picking Oumar Sy to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a rebooked fight here. We've got Paul Craig versus Rodolfo Bellato. Now, this fight was supposed to happen a couple of weeks ago. The fight was actually pulled, I think it was 10-20 minutes before the fighters was due to walk out. Rodolfo Bellato had the issue. Paul Craig was ready to walk out. So a bit disappointing, but the UFC have booked it. I can't remember what the issue was. I think it was minor, maybe some sort of bug, or, Bellato ended up not being medically cleared to walk out. So there was something there illness-wise, I think. And I already thought that this fight was going to be much closer than the odds suggested. Now, what's interesting is Paul Craig was around a plus 300 underdog. I think maybe the day before fight night, and he's not that big of an underdog this time. He's still sizable. I think he's still like a 2.5 to 1 underdog. So I still think that from Craig's perspective, the line is too wide, but strangely enough, it's not as wide as what it was. And maybe the market is taking into account that just a couple of weeks ago, Bellato was unhealthy to a point where he couldn't make the walk, and Paul Craig was. He was on it. He was ready. And yeah, maybe that's a factor. Now, I'm actually going to switch my pick from the last breakdown, because I was already very, very much on the fence in regards to which side I was going to pick, because I did think Paul Craig was live. And again, I think he's live, except this time he's got a fighter which, like I've just said, couldn't make the walk a couple of weeks ago. What's that going to do What's that going to do to the body? What's that done to the gas tank? What's that going to do to the weight cut? I don't think Paul Craig has, that much of an issue with a weight cut, whereas Bellato is big. So is Bellato going to have a rough weight cut, having to do it all again just a couple of weeks later after coming off an illness as well? So there's definite questions there, and there's enough questions there for a fight, for a prediction that I was already on the fence of previously anyway, to flip my pick. So before I did pick Rodolfo Bellato begrudgingly because, look, he is stoic, he is tough, he's powerful, he'll walk through fire to land punches, and typically, that's a fighter that is going to give any opponent difficulties, but especially somebody like Craig, who's predominantly a grappler, and will look for the wrestling into the grappling. But Craig's also not a terrible striker. It's just, I think that if Craig goes toe-to-toe with Bellato, I think Bellato's going to find the home for some big punches and potentially get Paul Craig in some trouble. But I do think that Craig has fought the way better level of competition. I think he's beaten opponents that are much better than Bellato. For a start, he's beaten the current UFC light heavyweight champion and the former UFC light heavyweight champion. He's beaten Magomed Ankalaev, finished him. He's beaten Jamal Hill, finished him. So there's absolutely no question as if Paul Craig has fought the better level of competition than Bellato, but also beaten better level of opponents than Bellato as well. There's no question in that. But again, Bellato, he's a fighter that is on the rise, that is, again, stoic and powerful and will walk through fire. So this is where I was left in a little bit of a mess on the last prediction, to the point where I just sided with the fighter of the here and now. But again, I was so much on the fence that a little thing could have potentially flipped me over, and that little thing has happened here with the fact that, like I say, Bellato has had some health issues just a couple of weeks ago, and he's going to have to rerun this entire process of fight week, cutting weight, making weight, getting back into fight night, into the warm-up route, warming up. So that's enough to switch me here. I think that Paul Craig does have a path to victory here. And again, just something else I mentioned on the last breakdown, you look at Bellato, like another referee on another night would have stopped that fight with Iho Potiera. So Bellato might have had a loss, and a finish loss against an Iho Potiera. If that was Paul Craig on top of Bellato, it'd have been a wrap. So again, like I say, so torn on this fight still, but I am switching my pick from the last podcast because of the health issues and the fact that I think Paul Craig, again, when you're looking for a fight where you've got the slightest of margins, the slightest difference, the slightest percentages, I'm going to head that towards Craig in regards to why the pick is flipping. So for those reasons, I'm picking Paul Craig to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Michael Chiesa versus Court McGee. And I think this is a horrible fight for Court McGee. And again, it's one of those fights where I'm not quite sure where he wins. Court McGee's always done his best work in regards to, his wrestling, especially, his clinch work against the cage, being strong, being, dominant in those clinch positions, dragging his opponent down, doing good work on top. Of course, he's had a couple of, big punches along the way, but that's generally been Court McGee's game. He's an aging fighter, very much declined. Chiesa's also an aging fighter and declining as well. So it's not a horrific fight where you've got a young, hungry stud ready to absolutely take the jaw off an old aging fighter that's just not quite with it anymore. But this fight actually makes a lot of sense from where both fighters are at. Like, I don't think it's super dangerous for either fighter. Like, I don't think, you're going to be hiding behind your pillar thinking, oh, please don't get hit too hard. We don't want to see that aging fighter just get, unnecessary damage. But on the flip side, stylistically, I think it's a really good fight for Chiesa, because I think Court McGee, where his strengths have been with the physical strength and the wrestling, I think that Chiesa is going to be bigger and stronger, and I think if Court McGee tries to close the distance and clinch up with Chiesa, that's exactly what Chiesa is going to want. I think he'll get a trip, take Court McGee down, and he's the far better grappler. So even if Court McGee was to get Chiesa down, it wouldn't shock me for Chiesa to be throwing submissions up off his back, potentially catch something, or, get back up to his feet, or reverse position against Court McGee because he's the better grappler, whether he's on top or bottom. It's just on bottom he's less of a threat. But if he can take Court McGee down, I think this is going to be absolutely horrible for McGee. I think he's really going to struggle. Then even with the striking, Chiesa's not a bad striker. Court McGee's never been, like a standout striker. he's always been very serviceable. Same with Chiesa. But if you're looking at a 15-minute K1 fight, well, I like Chiesa again there anyway. Bigger, longer, uses more weapons in regards to his kicks as well as his hands. And then when you start adding the wrestling and grappling, and it's just, you get to that point where, again, I'm going to talk about puncher's chance. That's what Court McGee has, in my opinion. I just don't see stylistically, is Court McGee going to take 2 rounds out of Chiesa? Well, and go to a decision? Well, if he does, how has he done that? Is he out-volumed him? Well, maybe, but Chiesa's going to be, in my opinion, the better, longer striker, and the one that's going to be looking for takedowns as well. And if Court McGee's the one looking for takedowns, he's going to put himself in trouble because he's going down in Chiesa's world. For me, look, Chiesa's like a -300, -350 favourite. I think it's completely warranted. I think he could potentially end up looking like a bigger favourite as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Michael Chiesa to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is a new addition to the card. I only saw this last night. We've got Malcolm Wellmaker versus Kris Moutinho. Now, Kris Moutinho must have been one of maybe not many fighters putting their hand up to fight Wellmaker. Wellmaker, we cashed on him against Cameron Simon last time out. Didn't really like betting against Cameron Simon, if I'm being honest. And it was doing an okay job, but Wellmaker, and I said this in the last breakdown, his ability to make reads and get his timing right is what is going to make him an elite fighter, in my opinion, because he doesn't rush anything. He doesn't go in there and try and start working before his brain allows him to work, if that makes sense. And yeah, sure, some people might say, okay, well, he might end up being a slow starter, but look at Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva in his prime would always give a round 1 away. Maybe not like necessarily give it away to the point he's getting beaten, but he would always definitely be off the gas pedal in round 1 whilst he's making reads, and then round 2 he comes out solid. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be Malcolm Wellmaker, but what I'm saying is sometimes, these fighters that have got a high level of fight IQ and high level of intelligence when it comes to the fight game, likes to download data, make the reads before they get started, those types of fighters will normally take a little bit of early time off whilst they're activating what makes them good as a fighter. And I'm telling you now, the way that Wellmaker does it, and when he's knocking fighters out, he's not like, putting full extension into the arms, turning the hips and the shoulders too aggressively. It's effortless for him, and it almost looks like what Conor McGregor used to do in regards to, McGregor, of course he had power, Wellmaker's got power, but when you get the timing down to such a perfect level, you don't need to be putting too much power into the shots to be flatlining people. And I see the same thing from Wellmaker, what we saw from McGregor. He gets his timing, he lands some perfect shots that, there's forward momentum from the opponent, along with, the strike itself coming from the fighter, and it just causes beautiful chaos and a beautiful knockout inside the cage. And again, Wellmaker's decision-making, his reads that he makes, the timing that he ends up getting inside the cage on his strikes is just a level of dangerous that I don't think we see from many other fighters in the UFC. And with Kris Moutinho, I think he's in a world of trouble here. Malcolm Wellmaker's last time I looked, I think he was -1,300 to win this fight, which again, there's no value there, and I would never bet that. But for Kris Moutinho, there's a reason why he's a massive underdog in this fight. Moutinho's style is very aggressive, forward pressure, will come at you and will try and overwhelm you. But all this is going to do is speed up the early moments that Wellmaker takes inside the cage of downloading the data and making the reads. And I just feel that Wellmaker's going to make the reads on Kris Moutinho quite quickly. He's going to catch him coming forwards, lack of defense, being a bit reckless, trying to land on Wellmaker and get him out of there. I think Wellmaker's going to make those reads super early, super quick, and he's going to catch Moutinho coming in with something, and we're going to see another beautiful knockout inside the cage. For those reasons, I'm picking Malcolm Wellmaker to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Cody Durden versus Jose Ochoa. Now, Jose Ochoa, tough UFC debut against Lonnie Kavanagh, but again, it just shows you the level that Ochoa's at. He's a really exciting fighter to watch. We'll exchange in punches, decent wrestling, decent grappling. And he's also super young as well, so he's going to have a really bright future ahead of him, and he's already, in my opinion, ahead of his years when it comes to his skill set. And then when you look at where he trains as well, he trains out of the Shooter Box Diego Lima team with guys like Charles Oliveira and Alan Nascimento, some really good wrestlers and grapplers, well, specifically grapplers, but, you know, fighters that have got experience in the UFC. So again, from a developmental stage, this is a fighter that's going to be getting better from fight to fight. Now, he does come in here against Cody Durden at a disadvantage from experience and level of competition, because Durden has been fighting the better level guys. He's been in the UFC for longer, so, you know, that definitely counts for something. But I just don't know with this one. Like, Ochoa, for me, I think could absolutely torch Durden, light him up. I think he's got the skill set, the ability to be able to be a real problem for Durden in this fight. But there's something in my gut telling me that, you know, Durden might come into this fight looking to wrestle. I think if he comes into this fight with a wrestling game plan, we've seen him do this before against young, hungry studs that are coming in super aggressive and super hard, and Durden just completely nullifies everything by level changing, getting takedowns. He's a good grappler himself, and just, you know, taking all the speed, the electricity out of the wild opponent that's fast and explosive, and just dragging the fight, making it dirty, making it gritty, making it ugly, but ultimately doing what he needs to do to get the win. And again, with someone like Ochoa, you know, maybe he stands up a couple of times from those takedowns, but if they keep coming, I think what Ochoa will end up starting to do is he'll start to get a little bit frustrated, a little bit tired. He'll start showing his back to stand up back to his feet, and then Durden will end up, you know, sinking a hook in, threatening a choke. And man, I came into this breakdown thinking that I was going to pick Jose Ochoa, but I just don't think I can. And at minus 200 as well, you know, I've got to stay true to what I'm saying. Like, I feel like Durden could get run over in this fight, but if he comes in with the right game plan, which Durden does, like, he's a smarter fighter than people give him credit for. Like, he will pick and choose where he wants to fight, because he can strike as well. So he'll have those fights against wrestler grapplers where he'll decide to strike instead of wrestle grapple, and he'll use his wrestling and grappling just from a defensive standpoint. But then he'll have those fights against strikers where he probably will think, okay, well, if I stand and strike with this one, I'm this fighter, this opponent, then I'm going to give him every chance to win. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wrestle. And the dude can wrestle and grapple as well. So it's like, man, it's a tough one. I'm going to stick to my guns, because when I say stick to my guns, I mean, look, I know I did genuinely come into, you know, delivering this breakdown picking Jose Ochoa, but I just think that the fight, again, with the right game plan, could be way closer than the line suggesting, and Durden could end up putting that veteran performance on against Ochoa. So, yeah, look, like I say, I actually genuinely came in, it's on my notes, picking Ochoa to win, but I'm flipping it after I've broken the fight down. And, you know, I'm changing my pick. I think that Durden, if Durden comes in here to wrestle and grapple, we've just seen it so many times. Explosive, electric, young fighter that's lacking experience, but everyone's super high on and super entertaining, comes in and just hits this experienced brick wall, and the fight just, you know, all the fun and entertainment just gets sucked from the fight that we were looking forward to. And then the veteran using the experience to get the job done. I think Durden's got to come in to wrestle, but I've got a feeling he's going to. So for those reasons, I'm picking Cody Durden to win this fight. And talking of wrestling, in the next fight, we've got Ricky Simón versus Charles Jourdain. Now, again, like I said, talking of wrestling, I feel like Ricky Simón's got to wrestle in this fight. Simón's at a stage in his career where I'm a little bit unsure. I'm a little bit unsure of exactly where he's at, because he's a fighter that I've always liked. I've cashed on him numerous times, a couple of times as an underdog as well. And he's a fighter you've always been able to rely on for pace, pressure and relentless wrestling. It's just when you have that one fight where it's looking like, you know, you might be looking like you're on a bit of a decline anyway, but you have that one fight that's so flat and everyone's like, oh shit, like maybe the time is over for this fighter at this level in the UFC. But then they come out again in the next fight and look nothing like what they looked like previously. And it's a bit like, it just leaves you a little bit of uncertainty of, is the decline actually there, or did the fighter just have an off night? Because again, I think this is something that's consistently like overlooked by a lot of people that are a fan of this sport and that analyse this sport as well. Like Patchy Mix last week, the amount of people that, that are saying that he's a fraud and he should have never even been in there. Like, I genuinely just think he might have had an off night. Like, in every single, it's not just this sport, in every sport, a footballer, a cricketer, a tennis player, an American footballer, whatever it is, an athlete will always have a bad night individually. And unfortunately, in this game, in MMA, it's a very individual sport. Once you're inside the cage, you are in there on your own against your opponent. Yeah, you've got your team and everything that's prepared you for, for the moment and for the fight. But inside the cage, it is just you. Whereas if you're an off night with a football player or a cricketer, you've got a team around you that can sort of mask that a little bit. There's no masking an off night inside the cage as an MMA fighter. So again, Ricky Simón is in that type of arena, in my opinion, where I'm a little bit uncertain of if he's declining or whether he'll just have the odd off night. Whereas with Jourdain's a fighter that is very much in his prime, in my opinion. He's not winning every fight. He is taking a couple of losses, but generally speaking, Jourdain's a difficult fighter to deal with and a fighter that's well rounded. He can strike, wrestle, and grapple. He's also got nasty front chokes as well with the guillotine. So Ricky Simón's got to be careful in this fight of shooting onto one of those guillotines. But with that being said, like, Ricky Simón for the most part does a real good job of hitting the double legs against the cage. So he'll shoot in on his opponent, the neck will be exposed. I guarantee Jourdain will start to try and wrap it up. But then what Ricky Simón does really well is he shows his quality within the wrestling, because he'll turn, once he picks his opponent up, he'll turn them away from the neck, and so he lands in a side control on the opposite side or a half guard on the opposite side, so he's not in direct danger of that guillotine becoming tight and him choking out. Whereas if a lot of fighters, if they shoot for a takedown and the opponent who's got a good guillotine wraps the guillotine and they lift them up and they turn the body towards the neck, then that's where they're putting themselves in danger. But I think Ricky Simón, with the way he shoots his takedowns and more importantly how he completes them, I think is going to be enough to remain safe from too many guillotines. Although you don't want to be putting too many, I think he's going to be okay with how he approaches the takedown here. So for me, it's a case of, is Ricky Simón declined or did he have an off night? If he just had an off night against Lockdog, then yeah, I think he's going to come in this fight. He's going to get the takedowns he needs. Charles Jourdain can be taken down, has been taken down multiple times. And I think that although he's the better striker against Simón, I think Simón will just be relentless in this fight and just keep shooting. I just see a typical Ricky Simón fight, plenty of pressure, overwhelming pressure, relentlessness with the wrestling, getting a ton of takedowns. There's going to be a few scary moments when Jourdain wraps up the guillotine, but I think Simón's smart enough not to hit a takedown and land in guard with the guillotine wrapped, or land on the side that Jourdain needs to make that guillotine tighter and complete. I think it'll be the complete opposite. I think Simón will hit the takedowns and land himself on the other side. He's going to be very aware of this, and especially when they're planning for specifics in camp, they're going to know that Jourdain's got that dangerous guillotine and be able to deal with it. If for whatever reason Simón can't get takedowns, then of course I think Jourdain's going to win and win comfortably, but I see the takedowns being a factor here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ricky Simón to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Phil Rowe versus Ange Loza. Now, just from a betting perspective, I'm quite surprised to see Phil Rowe as an underdog, as a plus money underdog. Like, I would have thought he'd have been sort of like a slight to mid level favourite, maybe around, the minus 140, minus 150 range. So to see him as an underdog, a little bit surprising. I've got a funny feeling, because I'm saying that I'm seeing as an underdog. I'm only seeing this at like 2 to 3 bookies over the pond from where I'm at. I'm not seeing it on any UK books yet. And again, once all the bigger books start, taking money on this fight, I do feel like it's a fight where the money will come in on Rowe as an underdog and push him into that slight favourite range. Like, it's nothing against Ange Loza. I am a little bit unsure of Loza, if I'm being totally honest. Like, he's a fighter that you can see is built like a brick shit house. He trains at Killcliff FC, so he's got good coaches, good training partners around him, but I've just not really seen that jump in development that you would probably think you would see for somebody so physically imposing, athletic, and is around world-class coaches, world-class training partners. He's not really made that jump up in his development. And look, I know Phil Rowe's coming off 2 losses, but those 2 losses are Neil Magny and Jake Matthews. Now, what those losses tell me is that that we know the ceiling for Phil Rowe, because without, I'm not being disrespectful to any of, to either of Jake Matthews or Neil Magny, but they are very much the types of fighters that will block opponents' routes to like the top 15 to being a ranked fighter. But if you do beat them, then there's a lot of respect that goes on your name then once you've beaten those level of opponents. So the fact that Phil Rowe's lost to both of them does tell me that there's a ceiling. But I still think Phil Rowe's like a talented fighter. He's super athletic himself, tall, long, moves really well, good boxing, maybe gets hit a little bit more than what you would like. But then he's got decent wrestling to an extent, but his grappling's like really good as well. Trains out of Fusion XL, so again, coached really well, got some high level training partners. And I just feel that Phil Rowe at this level against the likes of your Ange Lozas of the world will get good wins at this level. Whereas on the flip side, yeah, look, Ange Loza, he will win in the UFC at certain levels as well, but I think that he's beaten fighters that are at a slightly lower level than Phil Rowe, and Ange Loza will lose against fighters above the level of Phil Rowe. So what I'm basically trying to say here is I think the fight's going to be competitive for sure, but I just think Phil Rowe's a better fighter. I think, stay out the way of getting hit by anything huge from Loza, because again, Loza, as I've already mentioned, very compact, very physically imposing. You can tell that he's got heat in his punches. So as long as he doesn't get cracked and knocked out with like a big overhand right or, a massive left hook or anything like that, I think Phil Rowe's going to be okay. I think he'll land more volume. I think he'll be the better decision fighter if the fight goes to the scorecards and it's been on the feet. I just think he'll have done the slightly better body of work. And then when it comes to the rest, like Loza does like to wrestle, but I think Phil Rowe's going to be the better grappler. And I'm not saying that he's going to submit Loza off his back, but I definitely don't think that Loza's going to be able to hold him down for too long here. And I actually think that Phil Rowe, I don't think we'll see like straight sweeps. Like we don't really see too many like straight sweeps at this level in the UFC because, everybody's got that level of grappling. But what I could potentially see is Phil Rowe starting to make his way back up to his feet and then either brick walling Loza or grabbing a hold of a leg and re-wrestling, getting a mat return, getting himself back on the mat but in a dominant position. I think if Phil Rowe gets on top of Loza, I think Loza's in for a real tough deal with Phil Rowe on top of him on the mat. So with that being said, I think Rowe's going to be the more efficient striker. Just mind your P's and Q's, don't get hit with anything too hard in regards to a big overhand like I've already mentioned. Or Phil Rowe can be very dominant on the mat on top of Loza as well. So yeah, look, I'm not saying it's going to be a whitewash. I think Loza will be competitive in moments. I just think Phil Rowe's a better fighter and has more ways to win. So for those reasons, I'm picking Phil Rowe to win this fight. And in the next fight, the last fight to break down, we've got Vanessa Demopoulos versus Jamey-Lyn Horth. Now this fight is a newish fight. Horth was supposed to fight Teresa Blader. Demopoulos has stepped in. I would imagine at the time that we heard about this means that Demopoulos has probably known about this fight for a couple of weeks. So I would say knowing about this fight and planning for this fight probably 2 to 3 weeks, which is just less than half a camp. So definitely short notice for Demopoulos. Now you've got Jamey-Lyn Horth at minus 400 here, about plus 300 on the other side of Demopoulos. And for me, short notice or not, that's fucking ridiculous odds. Like, again, am I going to be rushing to the betting window to play Demopoulos? Well, probably not. But like for two fighters that generally go really close against fighters in and around their level, which both are in my opinion, maybe Horth's a slightly better fighter, but like they're in and around each other's level, and the fact that these fighters go that close, and fights in general, in these divisions, even into like, the featherweight, lightweight, welterweight, like when two fighters are that close, these fights can be so close and competitive to the point where you're getting sketchy decisions, split decisions, maybe going one way when it probably should be lent the other way, but you can't really complain too much because it was such a close fight and all the rounds were super close. Like, we've got that type of fight here. So for us to have a minus 400 favourite and a plus 300, 330 underdog is crazy in my opinion. Now, like I say, Demopoulos is coming in on short notice. Horth does have some good qualities that I like in regards to physical strength and control time against the cage. So I do lean towards Horth, but like, you look at Horth, she's an inconsistent fighter, trades wins and losses in the UFC. You know, you can make the same case about Vanessa Demopoulos. It's just Vanessa Demopoulos also on a 2-fight losing streak, but she's losing to fighters that, you know, Jacqueline Amarim, Talita Alencar, these fighters would run through Horth as well. So it's like, man, it's a tough one. Like, I kind of do want to pick Demopoulos just because she's like a plus 300 underdog, but I don't know. There is something that's telling me, again, short notice plays a factor. Horth can be, you know, quite dominant with strength and clinch work. So I feel like, I said this a couple of weeks ago with a different fight, I don't remember which one it was, but even though we've got a plus 300 underdog here, I feel like if any one of these women can be dominant and look like a big favourite in the fight, then it's more likely to be Horth. I think if it's Demopoulos that ends up winning this fight, then it's potentially going to be one of these close, gritty, split decisions that could have gone either way. So when I'm looking at making my pick, yes, we've got the big underdog on one side in a fight that I think is real sketchy and there shouldn't be a big favourite. But on the same token, I am leaning towards Horth stylistically. And like I say, I feel like if one fighter is clear, it does make this clear, does make this decisive and does make it dominant, then it is more likely on Horth's side than Demopoulos' side, who will likely need a very close, razor thin potential split decision to get the win. So although it's a sketchy fight from a betting perspective, I am going to be siding with Horth. I'm picking Jamey-Lyn Horth to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the breakdowns. If you're on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, like Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, then please feel free to come over to YouTube as well, which is youtube.com/MMA Play 365, because on there is a comment section where you can leave a comment. Tell me who you're betting on. Tell me where we disagree. Tell me where you find the value is. Tell me who you think's the best underdog, for example, this week. You know, you can drop anything in there. It is myself that does get around to the replies. So once I do get around to them, it will be me replying to you. Always happy to have a conversation and have a bit of back and forth, as long as it's an educated back and forth and you're just not an arsehole, basically. So yeah, just drop a comment into there. It also helps the algorithms on YouTube as well and gets the podcast and the video out to be seen and heard by more people. So it definitely helps. And as always, one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. We've got AI that's on absolute fire at the minute, and we couple that with the handicapper betting advice all in one subscription. All you've got to choose is either one event monthly or annually. One event will cost you $5, monthly will cost you $10. For an entire year, it's just $99, and that's our best value package, and that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.